Hello Year 3 and welcome to this week's topic videos. We're moving on from geography, where we've been looking at the geography of France, and I hope you enjoyed those lessons. And now we're moving on to science, and our science topic this term is all about plants and growing plants. So we're going to see if we can closely observe and accurately record plants in this lesson, and then we're going to look at how they grow, what makes them grow, what plants need, etc. over the coming weeks. So first thing, I want you to look very carefully at this picture and see if you can answer the questions below. So think very carefully about them. So what do you actually see in this illustration, this picture? It's not a photograph, it is a drawing. Do you think the person who drew it represented the plant at a single period in time, or maybe over different periods of time? And what makes you think that? Why do you think they put so many bits and pieces and structure around their picture of this dandelion, around this picture of a plant? What do you think they're trying to achieve by doing that? And what do you think the person had to do with the plant in order to draw the picture as it is? What did they actually have to do in order to draw the plant in this much detail and with all these features in it? What art materials do you think they've used? Think very carefully, look very carefully at the picture. What materials do you think they've used to draw this picture? So pause the video, talk to someone about answering these questions, and we'll come back in a minute. So pause it now. So there you go. I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope you had a really good discussion and were able to answer the questions below. And if you did want to jot down a few answers and add them to Tapestry, that would be great. Right. These are actually called botanical illustrations. So firstly, another couple of questions. What do you think a botanical illustration is? And why might an illustration like this be useful rather than use photos? Why do you think that they would do botanical illustrations like this rather than just use photographs? Because let's face it, now you can get very wide angle and zoom photos and you can get in really closely to plants. So why would these have been drawn? Why not just take a photograph? So pause the video and answer these two questions. Right, welcome back. So let's see if we can answer some of these questions. So botanical illustration is actually the art of depicting the form, colour and details of plant species, frequently using watercolours in painting them, or sometimes using really, really fine pencils and working really finely with pencils. But the thing about them is they must be scientifically accurate. You have to draw exactly what you see and in really, really tight detail. So you have to look really, really carefully and then draw them. So you can't make it up. You actually have to look very carefully and do the really fine detail. Now, most of these were produced before photography was invented. As it was the only way to visually record the world's many plant species and plant life. So they also did these for animals as well. So before photographs were invented, you couldn't just go out and take a photo of your plants. You actually had to have someone who was a really detailed artist, someone who was really good, a great artist and very detailed, draw pictures of the plants and things that you came across. Otherwise, people would never have seen them. So these illustrations, these pictures were used by physicians, i.e. doctors, to make medicines. Pharmacists, they're the people who work in chemists and mix things up to make cures for things. Botanical scientists, scientists who studied plants and how they grow. And gardeners, obviously, and they use these pictures to enable them to identify, analyse and classify the plants they were looking at. Remember, they didn't have photographs, they couldn't go to a photograph library, and often these plants were from all over the world, places they'd never been to or could never get to, and anyway, it would take so long to bring the samples back, they would be dead. So these were the only information they really had to go on. The oldest example of botanical illustrations was actually drawn by a Greek man called Pedanius Dioscorides. I'm sure you can say that better than I can. And he drew these, the plants around him and the plants in Greece between 50 and 70 AD. So this kind of work is nearly 2,000 years old, but it really became popular in the 18th century. So 1700s. it was at that time that a lot of Europeans were beginning to discover new parts of the world. They were going out on their boats. There was no photography. They were going out and looking at and expanding their empires, finding new lands that they hadn't seen before, although obviously the locals had been there before. And in these new lands, there were thousands and thousands of new plants and animals and species and things they'd never even seen or heard of before. So when they went out and started looking at scientifically and not just to conquer, they would often take an illustrator or a scientist with them who was a really good artist, so they could actually capture exactly what they were seeing. They did bring samples back, but obviously a lot of those samples died, or maybe the seeds weren't the kind of thing that can grow in our climate and country, and it was very difficult to reproduce the conditions that they found these plants in. So this was the only way of recording all of those finds they were making and working out what they maybe could do with the plants. Were they just pretty? Did they have medicinal values? So that's why it became really, really popular. So if you think about America and Australia and the whole abundance of plant life there that these people had never seen before, and they wanted to show people when they got back just how fantastic these things were. So pause this particular video and watch this video, and it'll give you some background and history of botanical illustrations and maybe some of the information to help you think about why they were made. If you want to do more research, then the second link will help you understand botany and botanical illustrations, etc. So pause the video, pause this video and look at this YouTube clip next. Welcome back. So here's another botanical illustration, and I want you to look at it really, really carefully and think about those questions and think about how it's been done and how they managed to get the pictures so accurately and how much time it must have taken to get all of that detail into this really beautiful piece of art, which is also a piece of science. So it's where art's meeting science. What about this one? How fantastic is that? If you look at the detail on those leaves and on those petals, absolutely wonderful detail. So it must have taken an awful lot of really careful observation and really careful drawing in order to get that looking as good as it did. And then to get the colours right is a really hard thing to do. So, not surprisingly, your task is to produce your own botanical illustration by carefully observing a plant. Our whole science topic is going to be about plants, and to start it off, this gives you a chance to really carefully observe, look at a plant, and then draw it. So it could be a house plant, it could be a plant from your garden or a particular favourite plant or flower. It could even be a weed such as a dandelion. It doesn't have to be something spectacular. It can be something as simple as a dandelion or a weed, but I want you to look at it really, really carefully. Make sure you get your observations really careful. And then I want you to draw it really accurately, as if you were a scientist showing this, doing a botanical illustration to bring and show people who will never get to see that plant before, and they need to know exactly what it looks like, or what colour it is, etc. So you might want to use pencils, coloured pencils. If you've got them, why not watercolour paints? Whatever it is, but I want you to produce and draw your very own botanical illustration. Then once you've completed it, obviously add a title to it, add your name to it, and maybe you could stick it on tapestry so we can all have a look at them. So that's the end of this video. I hope you enjoy the task, and I look forward to seeing you soon.